Greetings, Star Citizens! I am Trip Rodriguez, and I am here to bring you guys a guide on setting up dual joysticks for Star Citizen. So we're going to go over why I recommend dual joysticks, what joysticks to buy and why, and also your different options for setting things up, as well as doing the actual in-game binding and all of that sort of thing. So to start, the reason I recommend dual joysticks for Star Citizen is so that you have 6 actual analog axes, variable axes, to control all 6 ways that you can move your ship. There are 6 axes of movement in a 3D space, all of which are available in Star Citizen. And having a separate controller that you can use for varying degrees of control on all those axes is very beneficial. It adds to the fun, it makes it more immersive, and actually basically makes you able to move your ship more accurately and in different ways than people who are not using full 6 degrees of freedom control can. So what I recommend is 2 Thrustmaster T16000M joysticks. So the T16000M joysticks are under $50 a piece. They're ambidextrous, so you can actually configure it for left or right hand, which makes it ideal for doing the dual joystick thing. And very often you can get them for down closer to $40, and when you find a really, really awesome bargain, you can find them as low as $35. So for somewhere between $70 and $100 US, you can wind up with basically the best control setup for Star Citizen. Now you can also add pedals to this for your roll control. That again makes it more immersive and fun, and eliminates some of the little kind of catches that I'm going to talk about as far as binding your roll control and having to get used to having it on the left hand instead of the right hand for ideal control. If you put it on the pedals, then you kind of eliminate that whole problem. But pedals are very much unnecessary. Also, you can buy yourself a standalone throttle from CH Products. The CH Products Pro Throttle USB is sold standalone and is the best throttle to add to your T16000M if you want to use it for flying in atmospheric flight sims and such. I do not recommend using a HOTAS throttle for Star Citizen, but if you insist on using a HOTAS throttle instead of a second joystick, the CH throttle is still probably your best bet because it has a little analog thumbstick that you can use to get some analog control out of your Strafe Axes. I use a thumbstick, or have been using a thumbstick up until I got my new pedals for some of my Strafe Axes that is on my left-hand throttle stick. I was using it for the vertical strafe, and I can tell you from experience it is definitely less than ideal, but it's still better than nothing but on and off. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the various different joystick axes and how I recommend that you bind them and the reasoning behind it. There are 2 ways you can go. One of them is the more common sense method, using one stick, basically the right stick for all of your rotational axes, which is how you rotate your ship, that's pitch, yaw, and roll, and using the left-hand controller for all of your translational axes, which is basically your strafing controls. But I recommend actually deviating from that. You want to minimize doing anything other than just aiming with your right hand stick. That even includes things like pulling the trigger to fire weapons. Ideally, you put those on your left-hand control so that when you squeeze the trigger, it's not throwing off your aim, just like firing a gun. The actual trigger squeeze will cause your hand to move a little bit and cause a little bit of inaccuracy in your aim. You can actually get better results, and you'll be able to hit targets better if you move pretty much everything that you do while you're trying to aim onto the left hand. So there's another advantage to having a dual joystick setup, especially since you have a trigger on your left hand if you're doing dual joysticks, which makes it a whole lot easier to try to get yourself accustomed to using your left hand to fire weapons if you're using an actual trigger that your brain registers as a trigger, instead of trying to use some kind of other button and untrain your brain from many years of squeezing a trigger with your right hand on your joystick to fire weapons. So that's another advantage there. So what I recommend doing is putting your roll control on the twist axis on the left-hand joystick and putting your vertical strafe on the twist axis on the right-hand joystick. So the other thing we want to talk about, guys, is yaw versus roll on the x-axis, which is the left-right axis of the right joystick. You don't want to do that for Star Citizen. If you do fly that way, you're basically going to be gimping yourself. You're going to be introducing a handicap that is completely unnecessary. The reason that atmospheric flight sims use roll for the x-axis, the left-right axis on the joystick, is actually the mechanics of atmospheric flight, which don't apply at all to us in Star Citizen. In atmospheric flight, the rudder is has very limited usefulness for changing the direction that the aircraft is flying in, and even just for aim control, it tends to cause sway back and forth in an airplane, all things that are very undesirable. So you basically wind up using your wing and the lift from your wing to control the airplane's direction to make your turns. So there's no reason to sacrifice the ability to aim using your x-axis on your joystick in order to have roll there like an airplane when you're not flying an airplane. Even if you're a real-life pilot, or even if you fly atmospheric flight sims, we know of a real-life Navy flight instructor who actually uses the joystick the way that I recommend, even though he has to go to work every day and use and do atmospheric flight using the roll axis on his x-axis on his right-hand stick. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at these and go through your various different bindings. So here we go, guys. You're looking at your left-right axes for the two joysticks, your left stick and your right stick. So on your right-hand stick here, we're talking about binding yaw, where you would normally have your roll. So yaw is basically where you turn your ship left and right. It's like moving your mouse left and right in a first-person shooter to aim. You're going to be doing that with your stick to aim in Star Citizen. So that's what you're going to bind to your right-hand stick x-axis, which is the left-right axis. And then, did I say left hand? That's right hand. Your left-hand stick x-axis, you're going to want to have that be your strafe, left and right. All right. Moving on, we're looking at the y-axis now. That's your forward and back axis on your sticks. So the right-hand one will be your standard airplane-style pitch up and down, which you'll be using to aim at targets as they move around, and also change the direction that you're flying in. And then for the left hand, this is one of the places, again, where we deviate from what a lot of people expect. I recommend actually unbinding the throttle and using your left-hand y-axis for strafing forward and back. There's a number of reasons for doing this, but the biggest one is to be able to seamlessly transition from moving forward to moving backward, and to change your direction of control as you change the direction you're aiming your ship in. Allows you to kind of go into backward slides and stuff like that. It makes it a whole lot easier to maintain your range on your target and not get yourself into a situation where you passed your target joust style and now have to turn around. If as you are doing that joust you go to some right strafe to bring yourself a little further away, and then you can use some back strafe as you turn in on him, you should be able to keep yourself aimed at that target continuously instead of passing it and having to turn around and try to reacquire your target. So if you set it this way, your left-hand controller, your X and Y axis on your left-hand controller are going to allow you to move in any direction on a horizontal plane. So that's the setup that I recommend. It's the setup that I use. It's a whole lot more fun. It's a lot more immersive and very, very effective. So it's definitely a good way to go. For your throttle control, I actually recommend binding your throttle to this slider here on the back of the left-hand joystick. That way you can use it for kind of a cruise control, and you'll have throttle control from when you're just kind of cruising around doing non-combat stuff, so you don't have to constantly hold your joystick forward or in any other orientation on any other axis in order to be able to just kind of go ahead and cruise. So there's a nice perk of having the T-16,000s also. Finally, we have your twist axis. This is the Z rotation axis on the T-16,000M. So for the right-hand one, and this is where you have two different options, but for the right-hand one, I recommend having the right-hand twist be strafe up and down. You're only really going to use that for juking, for takeoffs and landings and things of that nature. Maybe for carefully moving around an asteroid when you're mining or something along those lines as well, or if you're hiding behind an asteroid and you want to kind of pop up and out. But you're not really going to need to use your strafe up and down while you're trying to aim at a target. Unless you're aiming at a target and you decide that you need to juke that way for some reason instead of just doing a left-right strafe juke, you're not going to ever really need to strafe up and down while you're aiming. So that means that you have control on the twist on your right-hand stick that you don't have to use while you're trying to carefully aim at and follow a target, which is very beneficial. Whereas roll is a very important control to use when you are doing dogfighting, to control the G-force effects on your pilot, as well as your view, and have the ability to roll your ship so that you have the best possible view of where you're turning and obstacles, asteroids, things like that that you might collide with, as well as keeping your eyes on your enemy target. So then for the left hand, you would be using roll. to do all of those things while you're trying to aim at a target, rolling with your left hand. If you find that too unnatural or it just really bothers you to switch over to having roll on your left hand, you can still go with having all of your rotational axes on the right hand and all your translational axes on the left hand, putting your strafe up and down on the left hand and your roll on the right hand. I do believe that it's worthwhile to get accustomed to doing it the other way, however, with your roll on the left hand. Alright guys, so we're going to go ahead and take a look in-game now at the controls and go through how you set these controls up. So you're going to go to Options. There are two different tabs here in the Options that you need to concern yourself with when you are setting up your Star Citizen controls. First one is key binding. Key binding also includes axis binding, which is what we're really concerned with today. So you're going to go into Advanced Key Bindings, and you need to use this arrow to move over to the joystick. We're going to go into Flight Movement. So you're going to bind your pitch to your Y-axis on the right-hand stick, your yaw to the X-axis on the right-hand stick, and then your roll, again, I strongly encourage you to use your rotational axis on the left-hand stick. Now note how it says input 4 here instead of saying, or not having anything like the X-axis does. Basically, your computer is going to register any joystick type controllers that you have, and it's going to give them each an ID. And you want to take note of which ID is being used for which here, because it's going to be important when we go into the control options section. So for most of you, probably the right-hand controller will be blank like this, and the left-hand controller will probably be input 2. But if it's not input 2, you're going to have to use whatever one is there, in my case input 4. And then the other three controls that you need to bind here are your strafe controls. So it's going to be strafe up and down, which would be your twist on the right stick if you follow my recommendation. Your strafe left and right, which would be your X-axis on the left stick. And your strafe forward and back, which would be your Y-axis on the left stick, forward and back. So those are what you're going to bind there. Now unbind your throttle. Oh, make sure when you're binding these guys, you're looking for the ones with the slash in them. A lot of people accidentally bind to strafe up or strafe down or something like that. Those are for binding buttons and such. And then they're a little confused why their left-hand stick's not working. Or actually, it won't even accept the binding. So they are confused as to why it's refusing to bind the left-hand stick and think they're having a problem with dual sticks. It's actually just that you're trying to bind the wrong thing. You need the one with the slash. So it'd be strafe up slash down, strafe left slash right, and strafe forward slash back. So those are the ones that you want to bind. Your throttle, again, if you want to bind that slider, that throttle slider that's on the back of the T16000M, this is the one you want, is throttle, and you'd bind that to that slider, not the throttle up down. That's for a different control setup that you use. So it's a relative control versus absolute. It gets a little bit more complicated, but actually we don't have any need to use that for Star Citizen, I don't believe, at this point. So the other thing is going into your control options here, guys. Again, you're going to have to hit the little arrow to go over to your joystick and HOTAS. Notice this says joystick HOTAS 1. So this will most likely be where your right-hand joystick is registered, and then for most people, joystick HOTAS 2 will be the joystick that you're using on your left hand. In my case, it's 4, so make sure that you keep an eye on that joystick ID when you're doing your bindings. So there are a couple things here that you want to do, guys. The first one, as we go down the list, is going to be the rotational, or I'm sorry, the curves for your axes. So you see master sensitivity curve, flight movement, and then it gives you your 6 different axes of movement. So flight pitch and flight yaw are the main ones that are a real big deal for your curve here. Now what the curve does is, the bigger you make this number, the further you slide it to the right, the less sensitive the joystick will be near the center, and then the more sensitive it'll be as you get toward the edges. I recommend starting at 1.3, but I'm not 100% set on that because we did just get a whole new flight model here with patch 2.0. I'm still trying to get used to it and haven't quite decided, but this is definitely working decent enough, so it's a good starting point. Now, you want to make this, its default is 1. You want to move these up until you feel like you're able to aim at a target when it's only moving around fairly, in fairly small movements without overshooting it. If you're having problems with the slightest movement, you overshoot the target and you're back and forth, you need to increase this. But you don't want to increase it any more than necessary, or you wind up with kind of the same problem, except that it's happening as you get a little bit further out toward the longer travel on your joystick. So you want to keep it as small as possible while still getting that good, accurate control. You can do your flight, pitch, and yaw. I recommend having those two be the same. And having the other ones set to something somewhat similar. You probably want to introduce some curve, but it depends on what control you're using and your style. I like having, because I race a lot, I like having roll have a little bit more curve on it so I can make nice small roll adjustments as I'm racing, nice and smooth. Again, I would say probably for your strafe controls, go with the same kind of thing. So you set the same thing on the other joystick, joystick 2 or whatever it may be. Now, dead zones are also very important. You want to set your dead zone for X and Y axis to be absolute 0. The default, I believe, is 0.03. But dead zone actually basically causes a hiccup as you transition across the center of your joystick's travel. It'll cause it to kind of stop for a moment and then go again, which can throw off your aim. So you do not want any dead zone. If you set your dead zone, a T16000M is an accurate enough stick that you should never have problems with your ship wandering if you set to 0 dead zone. But if you are having that problem, just use the Windows Joystick Calibration tool. If you go into set up USB game controllers and you hit the, I think it's under advanced or properties or something like that, you'll find the joystick calibration, run through that, and you should get rid of the drift so that you can keep your X and Y axis dead zones set to 0. Now, the twist axes on the T16000M, I don't think you're going to have problems with the twist axes accidentally registering when you're just moving your stick around trying to aim. But if you are, then you can put some dead zone. Just increase the dead zone on your twist axes until that stops happening. Your strafe controls, however, are a bit of a different story. So the problem with using a joystick like the T16000M and most joysticks, it's a ball-style gimbal, which is what most people prefer. But the problem with using that for your left hand and for these strafe controls is your left hand tends to be less coordinated, and it's very easy to accidentally, when you push your left hand forward to strafe forward, it's very easy to also push off to the left in particular when you go forward accidentally, and wind up accidentally strafing to the left instead of just going forward, which is a problem when there are obstacles to hit, and is definitely a really big problem in racing. And the way you solve that is to introduce a very significant dead zone to your left-hand controller. Now, right now with this patch, it seems that they don't have dead zone settings for the separate controllers, which is a little bit of a problem. But we can overcome that by going into the curve settings. So we're going to go back to those master sensitivity curve. Now we would be on joystick 2, for example. So you're going to take a look here, and what you want to do is start by probably just sliding the slider all the way over. And this is going to be on your strafe left-right and your strafe forward and backward. So for your strafe left-right, there's the one with the bigger problem. So you're going to click on this, probably set that all the way up to max, and then go into edit curve. Now, once you start trying to move this, it's going to give you the warning that you're changing it from the default curve. You say yes. You see all these different points. Well, unfortunately, what we want to do is create a dead zone, which is a big flat here at the beginning. But if you just move these down, you get this weird, bumpy, zigzaggy kind of thing going on. So what you want to do is actually delete some of those points. So you click on that point and you hit the delete key on your keyboard, and it will get rid of the point that you just most recently clicked on. And you want to delete any extra or unnecessary points there, and that will get rid of that weird bumpy effect that you get. So basically get rid of all but 2 of them is what I kind of recommend. You might even be able to get rid of all but 1. And you're going to do something along, I'd say along these lines. You want to have about a 30% dead zone, which is 3 of these squares for your left-right axis, and then you can adjust it from there. If you're finding that you're still strafing accidentally, you need to make it bigger. If you find that it's more than you need and you're not strafing accidentally and you want that control to come in sooner, you can move it to the left and make it a little bit smaller. I think we can delete this point here. No, okay, I do keep a point there. Then so double click there and add a point back, and we can adjust this and try to get a decent curve out of this. So something like that I think would be pretty appropriate. And then you need to do the same thing, so you'd hit save, and you've got that. So you want to do the same thing for your Y-axis, which is the forward-back axis on that second controller. So that's going to be your... There we go. Going to be looking for your curves. You see master sensitivity curve. It's going to be the list below that. So now we're looking for your strafe forward and backward. Same thing, guys, here. Again, I was saying before, set your curves to something similar to what you're using for your X and Y axis for these, just to make them a little bit smoother, a little bit easier to use. But for your forward and backward, you want to make sure that when you are just trying to strafe straight sideways with your left hand, you're not accidentally also going forward or back a little bit. I think that's less of a problem than the other way, so I think it requires a lot less curve to do this. You could probably even just go with a default curve of 3 or less. But if you want to go in and do the same thing, you can do the same thing here with the points. Again, delete all the extra unnecessary ones by clicking on them and hitting the delete key. And I would say you want something around probably a 10%, you know, at least 5%, probably 10%, 15%, 20% curve there for your Y-axis on the left hand, just so you don't accidentally strafe forward and back. So it'd be, you know, something kind of along these lines, basically. And again, you can adjust it depending on how much you find is necessary. So guys, I think that pretty much covers everything for the joystick setup. Hope that is a help to many of you. If you have any questions, guys, of any kind, just go ahead and come on my stream or send me a private message on Twitch, and I will do my best to help you out and take care of any problems that you're having or any questions that you might have. Anybody who's watching this video on YouTube, I stream. Currently my schedule is every weeknight here, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time US every weeknight, which is 3:30 a.m. UTC during the winter months when we're not on daylight savings time. And I think it's 2:30 a.m. UTC during the summer when we are on daylight savings time. So that can get a little bit confusing. And since that is AM, basically, you know, middle of the night, a bit later than where I am, that winds up being 2:30 or 3:30 a.m. on Tuesday morning, if you consider 3 o'clock a.m. morning. That's actually Tuesday morning and then through Saturday morning. All right, guys, hopefully I will see some of you guys coming around the stream and maybe come in, have some fun with us. We like to go in and do competitive matches. We go through news, we go through lore, we go through design stuff on Star Citizen. I really like to introduce new people to Star Citizen and give them as much information as I possibly can. We do a whole lot of really cool stuff. I also do more Star Citizen giveaways than I believe anybody else does. I give away an average currently of about 2.5 Star Citizen ships every week, and most of them are full game packages. All right, guys, thank you all for coming in, hanging out, and I hope I was able to help you out. I will catch you on the stream and around the verse. Have a great one.